Hello, welcome everyone to this video lecture on difference between statement of the problem and justification of the study. This is powered by Dreams and Realities, and your speaker today is Amadi Fineface. So today I will be taking you through what exactly is statement of the problem. I also want to understand what justification of the study means and see how to apply them in research writing. So let's begin with statement of problem. What exactly is statement of the problem? So let me just take you from what is known to understanding this. I believe in one way or the other, somebody must have walked up to you, maybe a child, and tells you, please buy me something big. It could be a car, it could be a house. Children could be funny. And you just look at the child and say, what do you need a car for? What do you need a house for? Or what do you need a phone for? So what you're expecting from that child is to explain. The child has presented a need. The child has presented a problem. And he has come to you for solution. Maybe you want to solve the problem, but you want to understand why the child needs this phone. You don't just want to spend anyhow. You want to be sure that you know what you're spending for. So you want to understand why the child needs this phone. How relevant is this phone to this child? Or how relevant is whatever he's asking? You know. So you ask the child, why do you need a phone? The child can come up with many statements. The child could say, I don't know, but I just need a phone. I just like a phone. I just like to have a phone. I don't just have any reason, but I just want to have a phone. The child could as well say, my friends have phones. I want to have phones too. I want to have a phone too. You know, what is actually happening in this life scenario? This is a life scenario, and I believe it happens to virtually everybody. It may not even be a child asking, it could be someone else asking, it could be an adult asking, it could be a friend, it could be a wife, it could be a husband or something. People come to you with one problem or the other they want you to solve in their lives, and at a point in time you want to pause and ask, why do you need this? What is actually happening there is simple. A statement of the problem and justification of the problem. Now, this is also a point I want to raise. In research writing, we would say statement of the problem. Fine, it aligns with me, But when it comes to justification, we want to say justification of the study. For me as a person, it doesn't really sit well because it does not carry the real, you know, the real concept of what we want to achieve. Let me go back to what we are saying. I'll still come back to this. So, in that whole drama between the child and maybe the father or the parent or so, is is a dynamics between statement of the problem and justification. The child is putting forth his problems, stating them. "Oh, this is my problem. I need a phone. This is my need." And you, on the other hand, asking the child to tell you why he needs a phone. That is just the summary of justification of the study and statement of the problem. So you recall I told you earlier that I would prefer justification of the problem as a better term than justification of the study. Because if you carry it that way, justification of the problem, it will make more sense to you, the writer. You'll be able to write, in that sense, in that regard. You're justifying a problem, not justifying the study. They are two different things, you know. So I don't really know why we are adopting justification of the study. So for the purpose of this video, let's just stay within justification of the problem so that you really understand what is expected of you when it comes to justification in writing justification, of the study. So let's come to the slide we have here. Statement of the problem. What exactly is it? It defines what the specific issue. You want to know what exactly is the problem. What is the problem? It focuses on its scope, context, and impact. This problem, how wide is it? How small is it? Those in research writing want to tell you what this is the prevalence, this is the proportion of people affected by this problem. You're trying to let us know how big this problem is. Who and who, you know, are affected. You want to let us know that indeed this is a problem. The context, you want to let us know the context, you want to let us know the impact of this problem. From these problems comes research questions. In fact, in course of this video, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to see how research flows, so that we are not going to continue writing disjointed research. Research should be coherent and it should flow. There should be this consistency in the flow. We'll come to that. You know, a statement of the problem is a gap that has been identified. For you to really understand all of this properly, I would recommend you watch one of my previous videos on identifying research gap. That will really help you to know how to identify problems. So statement of the problems, we can identify statements, we can identify gaps or problems through reviewing existing literatures. You'll be able to see what others have done and the areas that have not been done. That's why I'm recommending my previous video to go through. You need to watch that video so that you will really understand how gaps are identified, because these gaps are problems. Okay, over to justification. Justification, on the other hand, like the question you would want to ask the boy. Okay, fine, you have this problem, or you have this need. You want me to solve this problem. The question is, why do you want me to solve it? How important is it? What's the relevance? You want to understand the why. You want to understand the why. So here I want to also mention that it is wrong, completely wrong, for you to write statements of the problems that do not connect with justification, or to write justifications that do not connect with statement of the problem. They have to flow. I'll still come back to that, no problem. But let's continue. So in justification, you want to understand the why. Details of relevance, benefit, potential contributions. Explain why the study problem is important, relevant, and worth investigating. The aim here is to convince readers. The aim here is to convince the reader that this work should be done. It is important that this work should be done. It is necessary. So let's look at this at a glance. Statement of the problem highlights a gap in a knowledge or practical issue. It answers the question what. And through statement of the problem, you can formulate research questions. It focuses on the negative or unresolved situations. So while writing a research problem, you focus on the problem, not proffering solution to the problem. Don't go outside the scope of research of statement of the problem. So focus on the negative or unresolved situation. Includes a description of the current situation and its negative consequences. That's right. So let's look at justification on the other hand. It explains the why this research is necessary, why it is important. It answers the question why invest resources to fill this specific gap. Why is it critical, or why is it a critical problem? Because not all problems are even worth solving. For example, a child comes to you and says, "Daddy, buy me a car." A child of 3 years buy you a car for what? You can't drive. You wouldn't even be given a driver's license. So, of what use is the car? So it's a problem, it's a need the child has, but that need is not practicable when you're talking about solving needs. It's not relevant in solving that need at that time. There is no urgency at that time. So emphasizes the critical timing and need for an immediate answer. Need for an immediate answer. You know, assuming somebody wants to conduct a study on the effect of COVID-19, we are no longer in the waves of COVID-19. We are not talking about post-COVID-19. We are no longer in COVID-19 era now. We are in post-COVID-19. So someone want to ask you, what are you still doing with COVID-19? You know, you must be able to prove beyond reasonable doubt why that study is necessary. But when you talk about post-COVID-19 effect, okay, we want to sit and listen. So we also have rationalizes the study's necessity over others, provides clear logical argument and evidence of the problem's severity, focuses purely on establishing the worth, urgency of the action. So that's that about justification. Let me just take you a bit back again to a life scenario to help you understand clearer. I believe you must have had, you know, a situation where you you had to present a budget, maybe at the Senate or maybe anywhere. You have a proposal or you have a budget and you have to present that budget before a board or something, and they ask you to defend the budget. What they're asking you is, why should we solve all these problems you have identified in your various units? Why should we solve them? So come and defend this budget. So you're going there to justify why those items you have should be provided. First, you have identified the problems by writing them down, and then you go to the board to defend the budget. They will throw questions at you. So if you're unable to defend the budget, they tell you you don't have a problem. Please go back, you don't have a problem. So, but if you're able to defend the budget, as you're justifying why those items on the budget needs to be solved, then your problems can be considered for solution. Let's look at an example. This is adherence rate. This is a study, a collection of studies, let's say a tabular review on the topic adherence rate of antiretroviral therapy among pregnant women in Nigeria. Now look at all of these studies. First, they are all cross-sectional study. That means snapshot study, just within a time and space. So you have sample size, we have adherence, we have age, we have year, we have state and geographical zone. Now, if you watch my previous video, I was able to identify some research gaps here. So let me just identify some research gaps here. First, this design is cross-sectional snapshot, just one retrospective backward. So we don't have any study, any longitudinal study, trying to know the long-term adherence rate, of people living with HIV, pregnant women living with HIV. We have not studied their adherence rate over time. Then you look at adherence was the only thing identified. What about other factors? What about factors that affect adherence? Because adherence does not just occur. There may be some factors that affect adherence or compliance to treatment. So most the studies we have here, none of them, you know, included that as part of their study. They only identified adherence rate. So it is a gap. It's a gap here. Subsequent study may want to include factors affecting adherence rate. You look at the age. Among the pregnant women, they only consider people between 27 to 37. Yeah, 27 to 37, yes. Meanwhile, a woman's reproductive age is, let's say, an average of 30 years. But between 27 and 37 is just 10 years. So they have excluded women below 27 years. They have also excluded women above 37. Meanwhile, this age that they have excluded is still, within the reproductive age of a woman. So there is a missing empirical data among these people, because there could be some behavioral changes in teenage life. There could be some behavioral changes even at 40 or so that could influence the way they comply to drugs. So that wasn't captured. So it's a gap. So we have most of the studies here were conducted in the South. Just one was conducted in the North. So there's deficiency of study in the northern area. So we have identified some gaps in this study. Now, assuming we are going to write a statement of the problem and justification of the problem, what will it look like? That's where we are going to. Now you see that. Remember, the first gap identified was age exclusion. One of the gaps rather identified was age exclusion. Let's see how the statement of the problem will look like. Existing ART adherence studies among pregnant women with HIV in Nigeria are age restricted 27 to 37 years. Data is missing for pregnant adolescents from puberty and older women up to 45 years. Have you seen that? You have stated the problem. You have stated the problem. Then justification. Why is this problem relevant? Why is this problem relevant? Pregnancy does not begin or end at 27 to 37 years. Without data on these outliers, PMTCT programs may apply inappropriate interventions to groups with unique age-specific barriers. So you're justifying, in this sense, why this problem has to be solved. Now, did you notice anything? I have identified 4 problems here, and all of these 4 problems have 4 justifications. That's why I told you when I started, it is wrong in research writing that you state a different problem and you're justifying a different thing. Your justification and your statement of problem and justification must be moving hand in hand. They have to follow. If you identify 4 problems, we must be able to see 4 justifications in your justification writing. That's why I told you earlier that I would prefer that the term justification of the problem is used than justification of the study. Because when you look at justification of the study, it's as though you're justifying the entire study. Because justification does not just end in that chapter 1. We also have where you need to justify the methods that you are using in your methodology. You wouldn't just come up with any method that you want to use. You must be sure that the method you're using is appropriate, is suitable. You wouldn't just wake up and use any method and you want everybody to accept. No, so you have to justify. But the justification we are talking about is not methodological justification here. So it is the justification of the problems identified. So it is wrong for someone to write, for example, that this study has not been conducted anywhere. This study is necessary to be conducted because there is no empirical data in this part of the world, or has not been conducted in this state also. Meanwhile, in your statement of the problem, there is no gap showing that there is deficiency in empirical data in that area. It wasn't stated in the problem, in the statement of the problem. It wasn't written down. So it does not show consistency. It does not show coherence in your writing flow. So it has to maintain coherence. If you have identified 4 problems, you must justify 4 problems. So the second one we identified here was factors affecting adherence. Remember, factors affecting adherence. So let's see how the statement of the problem will look like. No published research in Nigeria has systematically investigated the socioeconomic, cultural, clinical, or psychosocial factors affecting ART adherence. The root causes of non-adherence remain unidentified. This is a problem. How would the justification read? Without identifying specific factors, e.g., transportation costs, partner support, or side effects, interventions are based on guesswork. You cannot solve what you have not measured. You are justifying that. Gap 3, geographical underrepresentation. Remember, we identified that most of the studies were in the south. So northern Nigeria is severely underrepresented in adherence research, despite having higher rates of teenage pregnancy, lower female literacy, and deeper sociocultural vulnerability. Justification of the study. Research from southern Nigeria cannot be generalized to the north due to differing culture and religious context. Ignoring the north creates a gap in equity for the most vulnerable population. Gap number 4, longitudinal or recent data. The last data we had there was in 2023. That was the last research from these collections of literature. So the statement of the problem will look like this. There is no published longitudinal or post 2023 follow-up data. Adherence patterns following recent policy changes, drug supply shift, or post-COVID recovery remains unknown. How will your justification appear? Adherence is dynamic, not static. A 2023 snapshot cannot track. Snapshot there means cross-sectional. Cross-sectional is a snapshot study, cannot track trends or verify if recent interventions are working. So ongoing surveillance is required to detect emerging health system issues. So you see how we have identified, how we have, uh, how we have provided statements to these problems and how we have justified them. Remember again, if you have identified 4 problems, those 4 problems you must justify them in your justification, right? The last example is this. Human study on the efficacy of bitter lemon in diabetes. Let's see some of the gaps I can see from here. I'm looking at them to see what researchers didn't do. Let me look at types of treatment. Aqueous, bitter lemon tablets, bitter lemon, under types. Okay, I'm not seeing alcoholic extract. So that can be a gap. I'm not seeing any study also comparing alcoholic extract and aqueous extract. I'm not seeing that. Then under classification, all the subjects used were all type 2 diabetes. We have other forms of diabetes. To be nice that we know if bitter cola is also effective in treating other forms of diabetes, but that information is missing. It's not here because most of the studies only focus on type 2 diabetes. So that's a gap we have seen. There. I think I'm also seeing there's in the empirical session, I can't find explanation, or mechanism on how bitter lemon reduces glucose level. There is no study that identified the mechanism on how bitter lemon works in reducing diabetes. So it's also a gap. So how will my statement of the problem look like and how will my justification look like is the next thing we want to look at. Here is it. So we have gap 1, lack of alcoholic extract research. So how my statement of the problem look like? Research on bitter lemon has focused exclusively on water-based or aqueous extract. The phytochemical profile and efficacy of alcohol extract remains entirely unknown. Then let's justify that problem. Alcohol extracts non-polar compounds that water cannot. If these compounds are more potent, current research may be underestimating the plant's true therapeutic potential. Is that making sense? Oh my word. Yes. So it's justifying that. Other research have been using aqueous extract. Meanwhile, we have some phytochemicals that only alcohol can extract, water cannot extract, and those extracts, those phytochemicals may possess, you know, may possess very high therapeutic potential that we cannot overlook. So it is necessary that the study is conducted so that we do not underestimate the true therapeutic potential of bitter lemon. That makes sense. Gap 2, comparative analysis deficit. No research has directly compared crude extract versus alcoholic extract within the same study. It is currently unknown which preparation is superior or if they utilize different pathways. Justification. Head-to-head comparison are vital for evidence-based medicine. That's right. This data is required to guide rational clinical choices and determine the most effective standard for herbal formulation. Number 3 gap. Existing study. Okay, number 3 gap, let me take that. Look at scope limited to type 2 diabetes. Now I showed you that the study all focused on type 2 diabetes. So let's see how the statement problem reads. Existing studies are restricted to type 2 diabetes. There is no data regarding bitter lemon's effect on type 1, gestational or secondary diabetes. Different diabetes, talking on justification of the study now. Different diabetes types have distinct pathophysiologies. Different diabetes types have distinct pathophysiologies. Research is needed to ensure safety and efficacy across all diabetic population and avoid a knowledge void. That's it. Number 4, the last, is unknown mechanism of action. Current evidence proves glucose reduction but fails to identify the molecular pathway. For example, insulin secretion versus carbohydrate absorption inhibition. Without looking at justification of the study now, I want to justify that. Without a defined mechanism, the evidence is merely observational. It's merely observational. You have only noticed that bitter lemon reduces glucose level, but you don't understand the science on how that happens. So it's more like knowing that something happens, but you lack an explanation on how it happens. So without a defined mechanism, the evidence is merely observational. Mechanistic data is essential for predicting drug interaction, determining toxicity, and gaining regulatory approval. Very, very beautiful. You can see how how statement of the problem is aligning with the justification side by side. So once again, don't forget, if you are going to write justifications, ensure that it aligns with the statement of the problem. If you have 5 problems you have identified, ensure that you have 5 justification. It should flow in that way. it shows, it demonstrates consistency. It shows that you know what you really want to do in research. So in conclusion, in research, why statement of the problem and the justification of the study could be seen to be closely related. The statement of the problem defines the mess. That means it looks at all the troubles, that's all, the negativities, the gaps, the things that have not been solved. That is all what it looks at. How big is the problem? Why justification argues why it's worth cleaning up. Statement of the problem defines the mess. Justification of the problem argues the it's worth cleaning up. Statement of the problem identifies the mess. Justification of the problem argues why this mess should be cleaned up. So every information given to you here, you know, are sourced from reputable studies, so that we are very sure that we are giving you the right information. So I'm very glad that you have been able to continue on this video up to this time. If this was very valuable to you and you have really gained a lot from this, please do well to like, do well to share, and very importantly, subscribe to this channel so that you can always get more and more notification when new videos are released. Thank you so much, and please do have a blessed day.